Grand Power is known for spectacular double-action, single-action hammer-fired guns, but Americans like striker-fired. That's where the Q100 came from, keeping that recoil-reducing rotating barrel action, moving to a striker fire, which also, aside from being easier to learn, moved the rear sight a little bit further back, giving you a longer sight radius, and their trigger, nice. The originals were so nice, they had to fix it. So with these new flat triggers, things are a little bit more respectable, a little safer for carry. But with a barrel just over 4 inches, 15 round capacity in a standard double stack, it's a little big for modern trends. So we've got the Q1S, their subcompact, tabletop review and field strip, coming up next on GBGuns. Grand Powers have been coming in this black plastic case for quite some time with little tabs. It does have a spot to run a lock through. It is not pry proof or like TSA worthy, but it's better than a cardboard box. Open it up, we've got the gun, and this bubble wrap is to protect the foam because these things always come heavily protected with oils on the outside. Got our mags with pinky rest. And up top, we have a bore brush, our mandated locks, 2 different front sight posts that appear to be of different heights, as well as the wrench to change them out, and our manual. Going to get the stuff out of the way and take a look at the manual, and then we'll go into the gun. I always like to take a look at the manuals because it lets you know how well a company wants you to know the product. This manual actually doesn't apply to the Q1S, it's to all the hammer-fired guns, but still everything in it is pretty much the same. The gun comes apart the same way. All the parts in here, aside from of course the hammer stuff, is different, or is the same. You get a breakdown of all of their lineup. And for those of you asking for specs on YouTube for some reason versus just looking at the manufacturer, you can pause right here and see the lineup. Not all of them are always imported to the US. It's just something you got to be aware of. But it's a pretty nicely done manual, very clear language, and in full color using renderings. You also get the warranty card in multiple languages since Grand Power is Slovakian, and of course this is being sold. Before we get into the Q1S itself, to illustrate a point I made earlier, here is the P11. This is the hammer-fired gun of the exact same barrel length and capacity, same size. But as I flip this over and put the muzzle to muzzle, you'll see that the rear sights are in different locations. Because the striker-fired slide can be longer, the rear sight is moved back a little bit, and the longer your sight radius is, the easier it is to aim accurately. That's because your movements can be more easily detected, so to speak, as your hand just kind of wobbles and things like that. And it's especially important on shorter barreled guns like this. So theoretically, most people would shoot this gun better than this gun, even if all other things were the same. Now onto the Q1S. I noticed there are some slight changes, such as the Slovak crest being added to the slide. That's not on some of the earlier Grand Powers. Also noticed that we've got CIP proof markings. The CIP proof house or proofing process is sort of like SAMI here is in the US, except in Europe it includes firearms as well. So that means that the firearm has been tested beyond just the ammunition that goes in it. Now on to our regular review. Check clear and look at magazine release. I turn the gun upside down and we definitely have kick. I like that. That is just a little bit of extra assistance in getting the mag out of the gun. These are very slick, so they usually do come out pretty easily. I've never had an issue hanging up. I've run Grand Powers in hot, dusty desert at front sight and in cold, sleet, ice and snow at Thunder Ranch, and not had mag stick issues. I want to say these are 12 or 13 round capacity. I forget. I carried the P11 for a little while before I grew comfortable in carrying a larger size gun. We've got controls on both sides of the gun, mag release and slide lock and release, and it locks and releases, and the mag release. I can do this so you can see that I don't have a finger on the other side there. Now it's hard to stabilize the gun. Works on both sides. I'm a big fan of this ambidextrous magazine release because for me I've often found that rather than break my grip and rotate to push here, it's faster and easier and keeps my grip intact if I use my middle finger to kick it out from there. Now what you just saw is the magazine catching on the meat of my hand. That's one of the reasons why I moved to a bigger gun, because I can shoot it more proficiently. If it's a carry gun, especially if you've only got one mag on you, then of course dropping the mag is not a speed thing, theoretically. Let's take a look at the gun. Starting up front, we have a little bit of beveling here to aid in holstering. Slide to frame fit is very tight. Nothing moving. That is a solid build. We have a single rail slot underneath. Texturing on the front of the trigger guard for those who like to run their support finger up there. I've got to try that one of these days. It's not how I was taught, so I've never tried it, but I know in Europe it's a big thing, and it just makes sense, right? If you've got your hand here, now this finger, especially when there's a hook here like this, and texture, which there is, gives you more control against muzzle flip, in theory. Nice high radius here under the trigger guard. We have horizontal serrations on the front strap and minimal texturing on the gun. This texture, though visual, does not hold on a whole lot. You'll notice that it does not have interchangeable back straps like the larger gram powers do. However, this gun is built for small size. I do like that there's a pinky rest on this magazine. It allows me to get my whole hand on the gun, despite it being a smaller gun than you would expect me to be able to do that on. Most guns I can't. We do not have any bit of a mag well, but as I point out in every video, a double stack magazine that is single feed is an inverse mag well. So you've got a skinnier part to get started, and then it goes fatter. No real need for mag well there, just maybe practice. If you're wondering about these plugs, that's because they use the same grip modules on the strikers, the same polymer grip, if you will, as they do on the hammer-fired guns, and that's where the safety and decocker lever goes on a hammer-fired gun. So they just insert that plug. Is it maybe a little unsightly? Yeah. Does it make it any less of a gun? No. You'll see that we have a striker indicator that protrudes when it's armed. Once again, we're clear. When the trigger's tripped, the striker's gone, so it's a very quick and easy way to see if the gun has an armed striker or not. These 3-dot sights are very bright, large dots, fairly thick blade, something that's good for quick aiming, maybe not the best for precise aiming. Can we still shoot it precisely? We'll find that out when we get to the range. Coming on the right side of the gun, you can see the part that trips everyone out, it looks like the barrel's dipping down, but if you watch the end, it's actually rotating. This is one of the neat things about gram powers. That rotation means that mass is not shifting back and down like it does on a Browning action. Say your Glock or any other common pistol that you know of has a Browning action or a modified Browning action. This rotation, to me, and to most people who have tried it, makes for a smoother shooting experience. You don't have the same recoil impulse. Now we'll get to the trigger talk. Make sure it's armed. We've got a flat trigger with safety dingus in the middle. Light take up to a wall. Crisp brake. A little bit of over travel. You can squeeze it past that brake. Reset takes you right back to the wall. No additional travel from the reset. That makes for something that is a very quick shooter, as I believe we'll see when we get this out to the range. Next, I'll show you how to field strip the Q1S. Field stripping gram power pistols seems to baffle some people. It's really not that hard. You've got takedown levers on both sides of the gun here that need to be pulled down. I like to hook my middle finger here to have something to pull against. And while those are down, you pull the slide all the way to the back, lift up, and bring it over the top. I do it best, as I've shown in other videos, with the heel of the gun resting against my chest. That's usually needed to get the thing back together, so I may not be able to do it in this video. If you don't know, my filming setup here has the gun about 2 feet in front of me, and it's just hard to rest against anything else. So, now that we've got the thing apart, see we have a captured recoil spring on a guide rod here, and this steel chassis, which Gram Power has been using for at least 20 years as far as I know, for their assembly. They did the chassis thing long before it was a cool thing. What it does is help reinforce and strengthen everything and ensure that all of your pivoting points, like when you're activating the trigger, etc., are turning inside a steel chassis. I believe it comes from billet, versus pivoting and turning those pins or putting pressure on those pins in the polymer. It leads to a much more consistent trigger pull and a longer lasting gun. You can see that chassis, and that's our sear, if you will. Big beefy ejector and a nice polished feed ramp, bringing things up. You can see the magazine presents a little bit above that, but the feed ramp being extra low like that, going lower than the magazine, I imagine would help ensure that even if your magazine has an issue, there's some guidance to get things into the barrel. This is a roller bearing. Since it's polished steel, you can't tell the difference as I rotate it, but that's a lubrication point in there if you're curious, because on that surface is where this barrel does the camming. You turn the barrel until it unlocks. There's a right way and a wrong way. I always forget it, so I just twist it until it comes out, and our barrel drops out. And we can see inside our slide, ginormous safety plunger there, and metal that's not needed removed to help keep weight down. Less reciprocating mass, less recoil you feel, smoother shooting the gun is. That's our camming surface. And we've got a nice polished, you notice the feed ramp goes all the way around. I'll grab a match round and we'll check for chamber support. For years I've been using the stuff from Nosler because they make their own brass and it's the most consistent I've ever seen. This particular package is no longer how it's packaged. It's under a different name now, but that's what I've got. So I'm going to drop this in and we're listening for a plunk. Like that, sounded really nice. Check to see if there's any snugness in there, and I can still rotate the brass. And then when we're looking for chamber support, what you want to see is beyond the bend there, is there anything exposed? And there is not. This is most certainly a fully supported chamber. That's important because should you have a case rupture, be it a reload that's been used a few times, maybe a weak aluminum case, some type of failure of the casing, where it's not supported is where the explosion is going to enter the area just above your hand. When it's fully supported like this, that keeps that explosion going out the end of the barrel. You notice that this has a CIP marking on it as well. Keep in mind that in Europe, 124 NATO is the load of choice versus the 115 grain we use here, and NATO ammunition is loaded about 10% hotter than our standard 115 grain. You know what else is 10% hotter is plus P. So although it does not say plus P rated on here, I would be confident using plus P ammunition in a CIP stamped gun. For reassembly, we get the barrel back in place and rotate it till it unlocks and slides forward like that. And we're going to bring it back over the back side of the gun and seat it, and it'll go forward. This can be tough at times, especially the shorter barreled guns have stronger springs, just the nature of things. See if I can do it without needing to rest the heel of the gun against myself. There we go. That's how you get the thing back together. So I was able to do it without resting. And we'll do one more check. Everything's still working fine. When we get this thing out to the range, you can expect to see cold shot first impressions. I've fired one of these, but it was about 4 or 5 years ago. So I don't recall enough. I've shot a lot of guns between then and now. So true first shot impressions, cold impressions. Then of course, full mag +1, our trademark what's for dinner test. The spinner test, which I think this is around a 3.5 inch barrel, should have a good chance with it if we use the right ammo. And then some practical accuracy before concluding thoughts. But otherwise, that concludes the tabletop review and field strip of the Ground Power Q1S. Thanks for watching.